So thanks so much for attending our annual Real Estate Insights webinar. So this is our yearly event where we look back at what happened in 2020, which has been a lot, right? And how that influences the 2021 incentive landscape. Look, folks, I know, needless to say, COVID-19, yes, it played a major role in what's to come in 2021. And you'll hear about that today as we kind of break down some of the incentives across our top 10 cities. Most importantly, we hope you walk away knowing that IncentiFind, we make it our mission to do more than just, watch what's happening from a real estate incentive standpoint. We actually aim to understand how this, the real estate incentive landscape will impact your commercial real estate projects, wherever they might be in the United States. And further, we also aim to disseminate that impact to you, but in a really easy to understand format. Hopefully we have time today for, Grace to show you just 3 digital reports from our top 3 cities that we'll talk about today. And you can see how easy this format is to not only digest the incentive information, but also act by saying, we really like this incentive program for our new construction of our hotel in Charlotte, right? Or we really like these incentives for, our office upgrade in LA. But we'll kind of hopefully have some time to show you some examples of that. All righty, let's get going. And so speaking, for those who haven't met me, this is Natalie Goodman speaking, founder of IncentiFind. And let me just give you a little bit of my background and how it's relevant to me founding IncentiFind. So you can see my background's architecture. I specialized in embedding sustainable measures in all asset types. I began my career at NASA, Johnson Space Center. Then I went on to work in the Texas Medical Center for Methodist Hospital. I embedded sustainable equipment and measures into one-of-a-kind research laboratories. After that, I would do the same kind of embedding of sustainable measures for the Department of Defense, specifically the United States Air Force, Johnson & Johnson across 3 different countries, and then with Shell Real Estate in their Asia Pacific portfolio. So all of my clients, they wanted to embed sustainable measures for the same reasons. Going above code or embedding sustainable measures or going green, however you like to kind of cut it, it's going to increase the value of the asset. It's going to attract and retain tenants better. It's going to create a healthier work environment. And let's be honest, COVID's really pushing that threshold right now. And it's going to reduce monthly operating expenditure, such as electric and water bills, right? So that kind of fast forward brought us into founding IncentiFind. So how it's going to work today is I'm going to introduce IncentiFind because there are some folks who've never met us before. And I'm going to talk about who we are, what we do, how we do it, why we do it, why we do what we do. And I'm going to show you IncentiFind in practice on 2 anonymized case studies. When we get to those case studies, I want everyone to just to be a little bit mindful that our owners, we're so grateful to them for letting us use these examples, but please refrain from asking too detailed of questions. And this is really to respect our owners' wishes of keeping their project financials private, okay? You can see we're based in Houston, Texas. We do work virtually and we serve all 50 states. You will not find incentives from IncentiFind in the US territories. They just don't work the same there. So we don't do any work in the US territories. We have begun to serve Canada with some of our portfolio management firms. So if you have construction projects or clients that you serve in Canada, please know that we're definitely making our way there. All righty. Come on. I like how this just stalled. There we go. Okay. So IncentiFind coalesces incentives from 5 levels of government. You're going to hear me say these over and over again today. It's federal, state, county, city, and utilities. For utilities, it's gas, electric, water. Notice incentives can be captured by who? Developers, property owners, and tenants. Yes, we house all 3 beneficiaries of these incentives. We have over 24,000 incentives, and essentially we can connect any property to incentives using only a 2-minute survey about the project. But before we look at what's in our database, folks always ask us, how do I know if my project will be eligible for the incentives that you house in IncentiFind? Honestly, this is one of our favorite questions because the answer is always that, a lot of projects, or most projects, all they have to do is go above basic building code, right? That's what makes you eligible for the incentives that we house. And most projects are already doing this and don't even realize this. And this is because most equipment that's spec'd is above code. And most equipment is above code because manufacturers design the equipment to stay on the shelves longer. So then they design the product well above basic building code, right? So here you have projects that are installing a lot of equipment and measures already above basic building code. Therefore, they're eligible for the incentives you see there. So let's look at what's in our database. Let's go to the bottom left and take a look at these categories. You see tax grants, fee waivers, rebates, bill credits. Honestly, majority of the incentives will be rebates and tax incentives. You can also see that our database is bifurcated: new construction and existing buildings. Yes, incentives are vastly different for these two types of construction. You can see our big umbrella categories: energy efficiency, renewables such as solar, water conservation. And then we have an other category. I'll go into that in a second, but IncentiFind not only made searchable, incentives from 5 levels of government across 50 states, but our database also will look at your project holistically. So we're going to look at all energy systems, indoor, outdoor, plus the building envelope. So that's windows, roof, any other materials or skin. We're going to look at the water systems, indoor, outdoor. We can certainly look at, solar if that's on the asset. But once we're done looking at the whole building, we then look at the land that the asset sits on, and that's that other category. So we can identify brownfield development, electric vehicle charge station incentives, opportunity zones, and new market tax credits. And honestly, the list for the other category is a lot longer than what can fit on this slide, but this should give you a good flavor of that. So now you know what's in our database. We get asked this a lot. Well, how many projects are using IncentiFind? And you should know we're on track relatively soon, to connect about 25,000 projects per year to 20 billion in incentives. And all anyone really has to do is fill out that 2-minute survey. The who uses IncentiFind? It's going to be corporations, companies, organizations that typically have environmental or sustainability goals or commitments. And that's a lot of corporations, right? We see a lot of ESGs coming out with many companies that own real estate assets. Also, just in general, corporations that own or lease real estate, they're always looking for cost savings because real estate's really expensive to upkeep. We have capital improvement planning committees that use us. They're trying to figure out, can they afford both the HVAC upgrade and the lighting upgrade across all their assets? We have operations and maintenance groups that use us for the same reasons. They're trying to squeeze every dollar they can to maintain these buildings, and we can flush additional cost savings. So whether you serve these groups or you are one of these groups, this is who uses IncentiFind. Why use IncentiFind is, again, you heard me say flush cost savings. This could be a ground up or an existing building upgrade. And folks like that they're going to get these cost savings while meeting these environmental or sustainability goals and commitments, right? Or they're going to grab these cost savings while meeting, these new sustainability measures that are going to increase the value of their asset, right? Folks also like our transparency tool. It's called a Verify report. You'll hear more about it later. This transparency tool, in one digital report, you can see all incentives eligible to your asset or project from federal, state, county, city, and utility level governments. When you can see everything that's there, more informed decisions can be made. You'll also see it's an incredibly low fee for our digital report. It's a flat fee, $500. It's a really low risk or easy way to get IncentiFind to help capture incentives. We work purely off a success fee. So if we don't successfully capture an incentive, we don't assess a fee. Another question we get asked a lot is, IncentiFind, I have this asset type. Should I fill out a survey? And our question to this is always, yes, fill out a survey unless you fit into these 4 categories. If you have an RV park, please do not fill out a survey. Food truck development, same thing. A golf course with no vertical assets, or you're a transportation project like roads, then don't fill out a survey. Our incentives are for the vertical built environment, not horizontal, and they're for permanent structures. So if you fit anything in this residential or commercial sector, you're a great candidate for our incentives. There we go. So now you know what's in our database, what project types are eligible for incentives, what projects should fill out a survey, right? And you know that we've got this 2-minute survey. It can connect any property to incentives. So what exactly does IncentiFind do? Well, we sell one product, it's a digital report, and we have one service. So let's talk about that for a second. We have a digital report called a Verify report, and it's going to tell you, again, all incentives that a project's eligible for from federal, state, county, city, utility level governments based on a 2-minute survey response. Okay, so you can either buy a Verify report, notice it's for one building, right? Or one complex if you have an apartment complex, or you can buy a portfolio report. Maybe you're part of that capital planning committee, right? Maybe you're that portfolio manager. So you just buy one or the other, right? And so that's our one digital product. We have one service. Once you know the incentives that a project's eligible for, you simply click, okay, IncentiFind, help me apply. And you do this directly from your digital report, and IncentiFind will go and apply to the incentives that you click for on your behalf. So now you know what we do. How do we do it? How do we connect properties to incentives? What's our process? We have a super complicated 3-step process, as you can see here. I'm kidding. It's simple on purpose. Folks, we want to deliver quality information quickly for decision-making reasons, right? We want to be sure that you have that information so you can choose the incentives that are right for your project and elect for IncentiFind to go chase them down for you. And we can get out of your hair and you can go on with, finishing stacking the capital, designing the project, constructing the project, because there's more work to be done beyond just the incentives. So notice everything's going to start with our 2-minute survey. We have 24,000 incentives. Please don't call our team and tell us about your project, or email us. Fill out a survey. That is the best way, because it's the minimum amount of questions we need to quickly match that property to incentives. We cannot memorize 24,000 incentives and all of their nuances, right? So everything starts with a survey. And I think the biggest takeaway is, notice that we don't sell any information to third parties. So whatever you submit, it's going to stay between you and IncentiFind. That's it. Once you submit that 2-minute survey, our system's going to send you this estimate of savings. It's called a soft estimate. You're going to see it in practice here in a second. And it's the cost savings from potential incentives, right? And so it uses historical data to estimate these potential savings. We look at your survey response and we say, okay, for a building with that scope of work in this part of the country, yeah, historically, most projects have walked away with X amount of dollars, right? So it's pretty accurate. I'd say, well over 95% of the time, it's a pretty high conversion rate that we have. Folks see the soft estimate and they purchase that Verify report. They tell their owner about it. If they're the architect, engineer, general contractor, or portfolio manager, or owner's rep, right? They see that soft estimate, tell the owner, purchase the Verify report so they can see the incentive details that are incorporated into that soft estimate. And they book a call with our team of experts to get help on selecting the best incentives for their project, right? Which ones have red tape that you don't want to deal with? Which one have a closing deadline that don't fit with the project timeline? So our team is here to help you cherry pick these incentives that not only most appeal to your project, but they're best fitted or best suited to your project scope and timeline. And then once you know the incentives that you want to go after, again, you're going to click help me apply IncentiFind directly from your digital report, and our team's off to the races to capture those incentives on your behalf. We operate off a success fee. If you want to know what that time commitment is, It's right here on the screen. Here's how it goes. It's incredibly fast. You're on the hook to fill out a 2-minute survey, whether you're the owner or representing them. So submit that 2-minute survey. You're going to book that 1 hour call, right? And we highly recommend you book that call unless you're incredibly well versed with incentives. Some of our, real estate tax lawyers are, so they know how to run and gun this pretty quickly. But book that call, cherry pick those incentives, and then all you're on the hook for is forwarding our team the specifications of the qualifying equipment. So 2 minutes, 1 hour, however long it takes you to forward all of that information. Again, really quick, in and out. We also get asked, IncentiFind, my project is in this phase. Can I submit a survey? Know that this planning and estimating of incentives graphic is on our website, so you don't have to memorize it here. You don't take notes. If you need it for a future reference, just go to IncentiFind.com. We say the best rule of thumb, submit your project sooner rather than later. Okay, if you have an existing building asset, please submit that as soon as possible. Yes, there's a bottom of the ninth. There's a cutoff date. And you should know, we have not seen a program where you can retroactively apply to incentives for existing buildings. If you have a new construction project, again, sooner rather than later, but you can come to IncentiFind. Maybe you're trying to decide between 2 to 3 land parcels for that ground up. Maybe you're trying to figure out, do I move that, headquarters to, this city or right in the suburbs? We are a great tool to show all incentives that could help inform that location decision. So you can come as early as trying to decide the location of your asset. Now, you can submit 12 months past certificate of occupancy. However, we've been noticing throughout 2020, more and more utility companies are moving away from this. They want projects in sooner rather than later. So I have a feeling we're going to be cutting that 12 months past CO to probably like 3 months, based off what we've been seeing at a national level. All right, so let's put all of this together into practice. These are 2 real projects. Again, if you have questions about these, just try not to be too specific, out of respect for our owners that are letting us borrow them. So first one up is a medical office building in Utah. Folks, like so many healthcare establishments, well, honestly, even offices and schools, COVID-19 has been driving major HVAC upgrades. So in this case, the owner's design team reached out to IncentiFind to identify all cost savings for this HVAC upgrade. And since it was an unexpected capital expense, they really were heavily relying on, grabbing any incentive dollars that they could. So the design team, they filled out the 2-minute survey on behalf of the owner, received the estimate of savings. Remember, we call it a soft estimate. It uses historical data. The design firm purchased the verify report on behalf of the owner. They bill them later. If you are representing a design firm or a PM firm or anyone that represents owners, you should know it's typically common practice to purchase the verify report on behalf of your owner and bill them later, just for ease of procurement, procurement issues. And after the design team purchased the verify report, they got the owner on the line and booked that 1-hour call with our team. You can see they talked through the entire report, ran through 20 eligible incentives, and decided 8 incentives made the most sense to go after based on the scope and project timeline. So the owner then clicked help me apply IncentiFind directly from their verify report, and that authorized IncentiFind to go and apply to those 8 incentives. You can see what they were worth to the project and how close that was to our soft estimate, even though they chose less incentives. For the tax incentives, unfortunately, we were asked to not disclose these. So we will keep those private, but there's the estimate for those. For the animal shelter in North Carolina, let's go through that. It was actually the GC that reached out to IncentiFind. We've done a lot of work with this particular GC. So they asked IncentiFind, can you identify all cost saving incentives for this project? They had some pretty high standards for this particular, I believe even certification for this particular shelter. So the GC filled out the 2-minute survey, grabbed that estimate of savings called the soft estimate that uses historical data, and again, purchased the report, billed the owner later. and then booked the 1 hour call with the owner. The GC actually wasn't on the line. It was just us and the owner. We walked the owner through 24 eligible incentives, helped the owner decide 10 really just made sense based off of the project timeline. And then you can see that what those 10 incentives were worth, plus the tax incentives, surprisingly, that were available based on how this nonprofit was actually structured. So that's what we do, right? That's how we do it. And here's kind of the why we do it. Incentives are created to transform the market. We all know that. And you should know every survey is anonymized, massively anonymized. And it's actually sent to the state, local, and utility governments. And it's to show them, you know, guys, we appreciate you offering this incentive. However, the market's really asking for this. And it's to help inform that process so that you guys can take advantage of better suiting incentives in the future. So we always encourage you, submit a survey to help inform that process, right? And a lot of the times it also has been helpful in telling the state, local, and utility governments that more funding is needed. A lot of the times, especially incentive programs are running out at about October-ish. Definitely by November, they're out of money. So we want to make sure that they know that the market does want these incentives and they should add more funding. So we've got, thousands of projects streaming through our database. It gives really good insight into the market interest and demand for these types of real estate incentives. And so we're going to spend the remainder of the webinar reviewing what happened in 2020. What does that mean for 2021? We're going to go over our top 3 cities for real estate incentives. And then we're going to put out in January the top 10 cities and their breakdown. And you can go to our website and download that and see, what if you have work in any of those 10 cities. So, all right, let's lay some foundation here at a national level. It's no surprise, COVID dominated everything, right? It caused owners to hyper-focus on energy efficiency. It caused owners to be conscious about reducing any sort of expenditures, especially electric and water bills. So in hyper-focusing on energy efficiency, we'll tell you that owners also looked at water conservation. It takes a lot of energy to pump water through buildings. The greatest uptick that we saw from a technical standpoint was in demand controls. Owners needed flexibility because occupancy loads are all over the place right now with staggering, getting back into the office and things like that. So we can tell you utility companies definitely caught wind of this trend and began flexing around their custom technology programs. There's not a lot of incentive programs just for controls, for example. So they have what is called like a custom technology. And so funds began shifting quickly over to those particular incentive programs to help owners address these needs, right? Alrighty. So, I know that COVID-19 has also hit our economy hard, right? So we've also seen state and local governments passing building performance standards. And this is because green jobs create more jobs. So they see it as a way to boost the economy while meeting climate goals. And we do anticipate seeing this trend continue across the country. You can see right there on the left-hand side, all the cities that passed it within the last 18 months, and you can see who's up next. So just like the building performance standards, states and local governments are aimed to pass solar mandates, just like California did. So they passed a solar mandate technically under their building performance standards. You can see there, it's called Title 24. It requires solar on residential. So 3 stories and below, 50% to 65% of site consumption. And 4 to 10 stories, they have designated solar zone requirements, right? Non-residential, 3 stories and below, same thing. You need to meet these solar zone requirements. We always like to tell folks, don't be fearful of mandates or these new building standards. They typically go hand in hand with incentives. So if you see a mandate or a new standard come out, you should anticipate incentives to come out as well. So we put together our top 10 list of cities for Real estate incentives. We can only go over three today because otherwise this would be a 2 hour webinar. But again, going back to it, we notice with the mandates, the standards, the strong building policy, strong climate plans, dedication to boosting economies. This all contributed to not only numerous incentives being offered, but also how lucrative the incentives being offered were. And again, this is all for real estate that all it has to do is go above that basic building code. So we're going to dive into our top 3 cities. And again, you'll be able to fully download this come January. You'll get a notification from our email newsletter. Before we dive in, I just want to kind of shout out some recent updates. You're talking as of this week and last week. From the state of Ohio, Grace, keep me in check here. We found out starting about, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, Grace, and right now indefinitely, they will not be promoting energy efficiency incentive programs. We're digging into why that is and trying to get a hold of as many folks there as possible to see exactly what asset types this affects, what project types this affects. But this is a little strange. We haven't seen that happen before. Again, that's the state of Ohio. Stay tuned. We're happy to give more details on that. Another quick update, Georgia Power has reached out to us recently. If you have any assets in Georgia, please know that Georgia Power has ample funds left and they are looking to get rid of them as quickly as possible. I think they have 3 million on the table still. So if you have any construction projects that were completed pretty recently this year in Georgia, send folks over to fill out that 2-minute survey. Let's see if we can't connect folks to some cost savings, okay? All right, so Los Angeles. As we go into Los Angeles, why does it say California under that? Well, to understand why LA is on our top list, it's important to understand incentive landscape. This means what builds that incentive landscape. You have to look at the state. You need to look at the county. You need to look at the city, and you need to look at the utility, right? We need to look at all of those levels of government. Because they all play a role in shaping this incentive landscape. So we're going to start with California, and let's kind of just dive in at the state level. So you can see they lead the nation in vehicle emission standards, appliance standards. Now they're going to drive that net zero code updates, right? So this is why ACEEE, or the American Council for an Energy Efficiency Economy, ranked California as #2 in their state scorecard. The state scorecard ranks states that demonstrate this national leadership for clean energy, right, by adopting goals and energy saving rules for buildings and appliances and vehicles and so forth. So California plans to double their energy efficiency savings by 2030. And so just for now, they have already authorized $200 million to spend on incentives in 4 years. So the green box below, you're going to see IncentiFind's tally of state level incentives. This is not all encompassing of, incentives offered in California. That number is more like, 1,500 or more. This is just what the state of California offers. So the up arrow, that indicates that more funds will be allocated. The plus sign indicates more incentive programs to be created. So you can see, because of these strong policies, these new mandates, right? Energy efficiency for existing buildings, we anticipate more funding, new construction, more funding. Water conservation, we're kind of getting a feel that it's going to be about the same, but they have pretty lucrative water conservation incentives. For renewable, with that brand new solar mandate, the plus sign indicates more programs being added. So we anticipate seeing a lot more programs being added for existing buildings and new construction. Okay, so remember, 5 levels of government play a role in shaping incentive landscape. So we looked at the state, let's go to the county. County authorized PACE in 2015. All you need to know about PACE, it's a specialized financing for construction projects that incorporate energy efficiency, water conservation, or solar, any of those things. And IncentiFind's database, we reveal if a property is in a PACE eligible area. Not all 50 states have authorized this type of financing, only some of them. So this county authorized it. And you can see the county plans to develop new incentive programs to upgrade existing multifamilies or buildings or complexes, right? So it's authorized already, 30 million for these programs. And now they're going to drive to fund water conservation projects and construction projects. The green box below, again, you're going to see that's the tally of the county level incentives. These are the incentives offered by or managed by Los Angeles County. So this is not inclusive of state or anything else. So up arrow indicates more funds to be allocated. Notice they created a new program, 30 million. That's why we anticipate seeing more funding for the existing buildings, right? Water conservation ample funds are going to be flushed into water conservation efforts in existing building and new construction. And we anticipate renewables will stay about the same because the state's already running a wonderful program, as well as the more local governments. So again, on that same premise, 5 levels of government, right? We looked at state, county, let's go to the city. So LA is ranked #1 by Energy Star for the most certified buildings. You can see the square footage there. So the market demand for going above code is really high. They've got a good, green appetite for green in LA. This city has a Green New Deal plan that they have really stuck to and continue to drive. You can see all new construction to be net zero by 2030, all buildings to reduce energy consumption by 22% by 2025. So it's coming up pretty quickly. Same thing to reduce water consumption by 22.5% in 2025. They want to increase those electric vehicles. They want to create 275,000 more housing units and 50,000 of that to be affordable by 2035. So again, hover to that green box. Now you can see why IncentiFind, again, this is a tally of the city level incentives. You can see why we anticipate more affordable housing incentives, both to be created, but also more funding in the existing ones. And then more funding to be pumped out for the electric vehicle incentives. That's charging stations, by the way, and charging stations that can be standalone or they can be associated with an asset, such as a multifamily, or maybe it's an office asset. Okay, so why on the last slide for the city of LA, did you not see energy efficiency and water conservation and renewable? And that's because LA actually owns their water and electric company. So all city programs are run through Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, or LADWP. So kind of the same drill here, right? We looked at the state, the county, the city. Let's look at the utility. LADWP is ranked #7 by ACEEE, their utility scorecard for most quality energy efficiency programs. ACEEE, they rank 52 utility companies each year. So to come in at #7 is pretty good. So you should know that LADWP also has a history of reaching their goals that they set. So we can imagine they're going to meet this legislative requirement that will have LADWP double their energy efficiency targets by 2030. So let's look at the green box below, okay? This is why we anticipate more energy efficiency programs to be pumped out, more funding in the existing programs, for that existing buildings and new construction. For water conservation, same thing. We anticipate new programs and more funding in the current ones. And then for renewable incentives, they have some pretty strong flexible solar incentives. So we just anticipate more funding, especially with that new Title 24 mandate, right? Okay, so that was LA, and those are the reasons behind LA. That's the LA incentive landscape. Essentially, it's more funding, more programs coming out, and you saw the policies that are driving that. Remember, we shouldn't be scared of mandate standards or things like that. Again, you're typically going to see some pretty strong incentive offerings to go hand in hand with that. All right, so let's move to #2 on our top 10 list. This is Washington, D.C. And remember when I said 5 levels of government play a role in shaping the incentive landscape? Well, DC is obviously an exception. It's a district, so it really just doesn't even have that kind of structure. So let's just dive into district or city level, right? So DC is ranked number 2 by Energy Star for the most certified buildings. So again, market demand for going above code is pretty high there. This city was the first LEED Platinum city in the world in 2017. That's important because when you do LEED Platinum City, this certification process recognizes outcomes rather than intent. So it's not just, oh, you have a plan, it's you've implemented. There's been outcomes from those plans. So, it's outcomes as it pertains to sustainable and resilient built environment measures. So you know that DC really means business with its sustainable DC 2.0 plan, right? They just updated and put out. They want to create, 36,000 housing units, 12 of those to be affordable by 2025, so quickly approaching. They want 100% renewables by 2032. I'm going to go to the next slide only because there's too much here, but don't worry, the numbers at the bottom are going to stay the same. So same numbers in the bottom, just continued from the top. So January of next year, so less than a month away, it's going to mark the first set of building standards to be realized on construction projects. That's a minimum threshold of energy performance, no lower than the local median of the Energy Star score by property type. So plus, they want to holistically reduce emissions and energy consumption by 50% by 2032. So let's kind of dive into the green box. What does this mean? How is this going to affect the incentives offered by this district or city? So we anticipate that on the existing building front, there's going to be more programs added just because there's more existing buildings in that area, more funding for the ongoing new construction that's happening in DC. Water conservation projects, we do anticipate more programs to be created. This is because of DC's holistic approach to how they look at energy. Remember, it takes a lot of energy to pump water through buildings, right? And then for the renewables, more funding. They actually have really good solar programs, so they're utilized pretty well. So we anticipate that they're just going to put more funding into those current programs. Okay, so that's DC. Let's go on to Boston. Now, Boston's going to be a lot more like LA. So it's going to have, kind of those 5 levels of government that play a role in shaping the landscape. So let's start with Massachusetts. So it's ranked number 1 by ACEEE scorecard 9 years in a row. This scorecard ranks the states that demonstrate this national leadership for clean energy goals and establishing energy saving rules for buildings and appliances and vehicles and so forth. So it kind of goes without saying that Massachusetts is really good at adopting and achieving their goals. That's kind of the takeaway. Now, their Green Communities Act is really the policy backbone for funding a lot of the state and local incentives. And you should know every 3 years, Massachusetts sets a higher goal for energy efficiency. So you can see right there, next year will mark the last year in the 3-year window that started in 2019, right? So the new higher goals for energy efficiency will come out. And because their goals are so aggressive as far as timeline, funding is ample. You can see right there, $2.7 billion already authorized. Further, the state really doesn't focus on one building type over another. It doesn't focus on multifamily versus something else. They really just blanketedly look at all asset types kind of evenly across the board. So let's go to the green boxes. And again, this is state incentive programs, not all encompassing of what's offered in Massachusetts, just what the state runs. So energy efficiency, they already had plenty of programs. We anticipate they're going to put out more, especially to kind of warm up the 2022 3-year energy plan that will kick off, right? They're going to want to kind of test those out in 2021 before they really kickstart those the next year. definitely more funding as well. Water conservation, we're kind of just seeing that it's going to stay about the same. They've got some pretty decent programs there. Again, pretty evenly spread. They don't favor any asset types, so not even new versus existing buildings. And then renewables, we anticipate just more funding there. They have some great programs that have a good framework and are pretty flexible to leverage on any asset type. Okay, so for these 5 levels of government, as you guys know, New England states really don't have an active county government. So all incentives will either roll up to the state level or they'll be managed at the more local levels like city or utility. So let's have a look at the city of Boston. We looked at state, county, now we're at city, right? So Boston, ranked number 9 by Energy Star for the most certified buildings. So the market demand for going above code, fairly high here. It's also ranked number 2 by ACEEE City Scorecard. By the way, it was number 1 on that same scorecard for 6 years in a row. This past year is the first time they've fallen to number 2. And you should know the city scorecard, it's going to rank the efforts of 100 major cities to make buildings and transportation, more energy efficient and really scale up the use of renewables such as solar, right? So kind of just like the state of Massachusetts, Boston's really good at adopting and achieving their goals, right? So let's look at their climate action plan because that's really the driver here. So Boston met their carbon reduction goal of 25% by 2020. So they're good at it. Remember, achieving those setting and achieving goals. You should know this makes them likely to also meet their interim goal of a 50% reduction by 2030. And honestly, I don't think we would be surprised if they also met their carbon neutral goal by 2050. They do need about 69,000 housing units. 16,000 need to be affordable by 2030. They need to address flood mitigation, rising sea levels. So resilience is really a hot topic in Boston through their Resilient Boston initiatives. They want a more walkable city. Waste diversions are really important to them. So we anticipate more affordable housing incentives in existing and new construction, as well as more funding. And the resilience incentives, they'll probably be creating new programs. We've been noticing with resilient incentives that exist across the United States, they're really becoming more, they're sort of an iterative process, right? You cannot just address resiliency in one fell swoop or with one program. So they're quite custom, which makes, there's a lot of variety of resilience programs out there. So we looked at this city, remember state, county, city. Let's look at the utility. It happens to be Eversource. We're just going to stay on the electric utility just for the sake of time. We didn't do gas, but we did go ahead and tabulate the water incentives. So Eversource, you should know that they're ranked number 1 by ACEEE scorecard. It ranks 52, remember, utility companies for offering these quality and energy efficiency incentive programs. In 2019 alone, Eversource distributed $500 million to construction projects. They have ample funding. Now, they're also going to divert their attention to driving up electric vehicles, battery storage projects, and they're going to do this through their lucrative incentive programs, right? I think the biggest takeaway for Eversource is they don't just give this sort of head nod to the state of Massachusetts and say, okay, yeah, we agree with your energy reduction goals. Eversource actually works pretty hand in hand in helping to contribute to the achievement of these goals. So as the state, right, does that 3-year energy plan revolvement, Eversource is going to be right there to be pumping out more incentives and more funding for incentives, right? So let's have a look in the green box. We do anticipate for energy efficiency incentives, more programs, more funding for sure. Water conservation, we're mostly seeing just more funding or hearing about more funding in existing buildings. For renewable incentive programs, they've got great programs that are already in place. They'll just be adding more funding to those particular incentive programs. So, we hope that based on this webinar, you can see how you can rely on IncentiFind to stay ahead of that incentive landscape. And we do this across the United States. And again, now we're moving into parts of Canada. Here's our top 10 cities for 2021. That report's going to come out first of next year. You'll go to IncentiFind.com. You can download that report. It's going to have that similar breakdown that I ran through. We try to keep things really digestible at IncentiFind. We know it's a lot to take in, and you can kind of lean on us to do all of that grunt work. And then also you can, make it even more easy on yourself by just filling out a 2-minute survey and fully putting that burden of understanding which incentives are best suited for your construction project on us, right? If you do have construction projects in these 10 cities, I think you should get really excited. I think there's going to be awesome opportunities for cost savings in 2021, especially as a lot of state and local governments are really looking at boosting the economy. We do anticipate a lot of fantastic economic development type of incentives. We didn't talk about that today, but you should know we house those incentives. We usually save that for our report. So that said, I think we're right at time. Grace, I am happy to open up the dialogue for questions. Let me kind of switch gears here for anyone who might have questions. Give me 1 second. There we go. I got to open up all of my, okay. I have some direct messages. So I've answered some of these. Yes, yes, you're going to be able to download this report. You're also going to get a recording of this. If you would like the pitch deck, that's fine. You have in the chat my email address. We're happy to kind of just put this deck in a PDF file. It's quite large, I'll say, but yeah, if you want that, I'm happy to share that. Let me scroll to the next one. Yeah, how do we look at economic development? Okay, we did not talk about that today, but we do have those tax incentives. Let me actually scroll back to this because I know I did zoom over it. You probably saw this, these two case studies. So for the tax incentives that we house, actually, Grace, do you maybe have those 3 reports ready and you can maybe throw them on the screen? That might be better to talk to.
Sure. Yeah, I got them queued up. So let me share that.
Yeah, let me stop sharing. So we do show the tax incentives, and I think it'll be easier for you to see these on the reports. So hopefully you're still on the line. There we go. Okay, so Grace has a verify report teed up. Look how all encompassing this is. This is the city of Los Angeles. This is a real project, so we have to be careful how we scroll. But there's those 5 levels of government. So you see there's tax incentives that we are tracking. We also track, if you see the none, let me just address this. We do that because tracking the null or negative data, we had a lot of our developers or those representing them or building owners say, hey, IncentiFind, did you actually check with, City of Los Angeles for this incentive? By showing that we did and there's nothing offered, you should know we've got that relationship. And if there is something to be piloted, we typically are first to know. We are helping several cities across the country pilot new programs. And so, you can also see here, this is DC. Yeah, let's hang tight here for a second. We've got, can you scroll to some tax incentives real quick? There we go, that's perfect. So we've got some of the tax incentives listed here. Again, it'll be based on your survey response. And when we get to those tax incentives, will you click on that 45L for me, please, number 30? We will definitely talk about how this incentive is right for your project. Please know that we cannot qualify your eligibility. We are not a financial firm. We are not a tax firm, but we can quickly walk you through how you met the minimum requirements. And so you should definitely talk to an expert about capturing this lucrative tax incentive. I think this one, 45L, you can get up to like $2,000 of tax credits isn't it per unit? Yeah, right there in the maximum funds. So it's pretty lucrative. And notice we've got a third-party expert, Josh, that we work with in this part of the country. You simply click the Get Connected and you will get an email connecting you to Josh. Y'all can have a fantastic conversation about your project, but just unfortunately that is not done within IncentiFind. So hopefully I answered your question that yes, we do house those tax incentives. We don't provide the services in-house. It's just for the utility incentives. So let me go back to, let me just check time. We still have 8 minutes. Okay, let me go back to this. I think nope, I already answered these others, but I'm happy to just kind of reiterate them. For do we monitor cities beyond top 10? No, we usually put out a top 10 list, but I wouldn't let that be, if your city is not within that top 10, I wouldn't let that be a discouragement. Because there's a lot of cities that we have seen projects find lucrative or massive amounts of cost saving incentives, and they weren't on that list. It really just depends on what the project's doing and what part of the country they are in. So no, I wouldn't let that top 10 list discourage you. It's just something we put out every year. We do monitor, maybe this was more of your question, we do monitor about 84 cities across the United States. That's where majority of the construction is happening. Or you can also look at it as 25 major metro areas. And so we can pretty much have a good feel that we're fairly enhanced from an incentive standpoint, and can produce reports like this. And Grace, if you'll stay here, this is actually how a verify report will arrive to you. And if you'll click, Grace, just star any of the incentives and then remember to unstar them. On the 1 hour call, you'll go through the good, the bad, the ugly with our team. And the goal will be to cherry pick the incentives you want. So maybe those are click one more. Maybe these are the 4 that you want. And can you collapse it real quick whenever you get a chance? Once you get to that, you will, kind of see that these are the incentives that are most lucrative for your project based on its timeline and scope. And so from there, you can just use the below detailed section to click the buttons and either get connected to a tax professional or get help applying, right? And that's where you just forward IncentiFind specification documents, and we're off to the races. The get connected's for our tax services. So maybe that was a helpful visual to how expansive our verify reports are, but how we quickly get you to dwindle them down to really what matters. I see another one coming in. What's the average projects? So the question is, what is the average number of incentives that a project uses? It kind of varies, but I'd say on a national spread, keep me in check here, Grace, maybe like 3 to 4 to maybe around 4 incentives.
A handful. Yeah. Usually each report has somewhere in the 20, 25 ballpark, somewhere around there.
Yeah. So the report will have the incentives, but most projects are just going after
about 4 or 5 or so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the reason for that is, because I imagine this will be your follow-up question, is that, again, your project timeline and scope will dictate a lot of this. Just because an incentive is offered doesn't mean it's right for the project. It might require measurement and verification, which requires additional engineering services. So we can walk you through a lot of that. We have access to all of that data. So again, our goal on that 1 hour call is to find the best suited incentives for your project, help you understand how much those are worth, and what's the strategy for IncentiFind to capture those. So hopefully that answered that. I have definitely run through all of my questions. Grace, did you have any on your, oops, I think I see more. Oh no, never mind. That's on your actual screen, Grace. I was trying to click the little chat. Sorry.
No,
never mind. That's all the questions I had in mind. Remember, you're going to get a recording of this webinar. You have my email address for the person who asked for the actual presentation deck. But honestly, I'll tell you, the report's going to look a lot better. So you might want to wait for that come January. And then if you have any other questions, want to maybe talk a little bit about what you do, how we can help either your firm, or maybe you're the owner or building owner or developer on the line, you've got my email. Shoot me an email with your questions, and I'm happy to take some time to answer those. But Thanks so much for your time. And we hope everyone stays safe, has a great rest of your day. So thank you. We'll see you next year for our report. Bye bye.